Good morning, and welcome to day 141 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. Today we look at Nehemiah chapters 7 and 8. And in our recent chapters, we saw the obstacles that Nehemiah faced when he wanted to get this city wall built, but that project ultimately came to fruition and to completion. And now that the city wall is built, they're ready to rebuild the city itself. Again, so far, the primary thing that's been rebuilt is the temple. They began that project. They came back in around 538 BC. They began rebuilding the temple around 536 BC, but it got put on hold and really wasn't built in earnest until 521 to 516 BC. And then, more than a generation later, Ezra came in about 458 BC, and then Nehemiah came in about 444 BC and led the rebuilding of the city walls and now the city itself. The text says that there were few who were actually living in the city. It was still in ruins. So we need to process everything through the lens of covenant renewal. That's particularly important today with the genealogy and the numbering of those who make a claim to that area, because this goes hand in hand. If you notice in chapter 8, they're celebrating the festival of Tabernacles. This is celebrating when God came down the mountain at Mount Sinai and tabernacle dwelt in the midst of his people, and it's remembering how he sustained them even when they didn't have the resources as they were going through the wilderness. Well, here they are, this fledgling returning tribe, having to literally rebuild from the ground up. And so they are petitioning for God to be in their midst. They don't have numbers. They don't have impressive resources. They don't have a mighty kingdom or an impressive army. They are reliant on the Lord. And so they want to get this right. This really harkens back to when we look at Numbers. You had the genealogy of those who came out of Egypt, but then you had a second genealogy of those who were actually going to enter into the land of promise. So it's precisely when they are getting ready to rebuild this city that they take, that they handle the genealogy of those making claims to that area to build their homes. In chapter 8, what I think is just one of the most important scenes that you get after the exile. Again, they're celebrating the feast of shelters or booths or tabernacles. And look what happens. All the people gathered together, and then they ask Ezra, the scribe, to bring the book of the law of Moses that the Lord had given Israel. And Ezra reads and explains the meaning. What does that mean? It means that the people who have been living in exile, most of them don't know Hebrew. Most of them are probably speaking Aramaic or something that was learned in Persia or Babylon. Most of them are not reading Hebrew. And so Ezra has to lead them both in the reading of the word and in the explaining of the word to make it intelligible for them. And when the people hear the word of the Lord, they fall on their faces. And I think this is just so significant. They're humbled by the reading of the word. This becomes an incredible time of celebration. And what's so important, you read in verse 6 that they knelt low and worshiped the Lord with their faces to the ground. They read out verse 8 of the book of the law of God, translating and giving meaning so that the people could understand what was read. As they continue celebrating, it says in verse 17, the Israelites had not celebrated like this since the days of Joshua, son of Nun. They have not celebrated like this since God had brought them into the land the first time. They are framing up that they're hoping God will be with them as they are settling the land a second time. They're trying to get right what went wrong the first time. Remember, when Joshua was coming into the land, God said, do not stray from the right or the left of the law. Meditate on it day and night so that you'll have success in whatever you do. As we saw with the kings, that was David's advice to Solomon that Solomon did not heed. And so Solomon built an impressive palace. He built an impressive temple, but he strayed and set the course away from the law of God, and that's what led the people toward exile. Well, now they've come back. They've rebuilt the temple. They're rebuilt the wall, and they're about to rebuild the city. What do they recognize as absolutely foundational for them to get right? meditating, hearing, submitting to the word of the Lord. That's so much of what's going on in chapter 8. They want to get right the second time the thing that went wrong the first time. So you will see in this post-exilic period a brand new emphasis on honoring the law of God, and that will take some positive forms. It will also set up some negative things down the way that we'll talk about in days to come. In the meantime, keep reading, reflecting, and responding to God's word, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.